Watching a woman trapped in a room. Final part. Below is a revised and substantially expanded edition of the final part, preserving the tone and narrative from your text while improving grammar and adding depth. The result is approximately 4,000 words, offering a more detailed account of the story's conclusion. I spent the next 5 days watching Rachel die. If you looked only at the monitor, what I saw during that time didn't seem so different from the previous 3 years of my so-called job. Rachel slept in that small bedroom, watched TV off and on, read a handful of paperback novels, and did her paintings. At a glance, her routine didn't dramatically change, but once I paid close attention, everything was different. She was exhausted and on edge. Sometimes she slept more than usual, and every now and then she would glance at the camera, glance at me, and in those moments the fear and sadness I saw in her eyes made me feel like a burned-out house collapsing in on itself. Inside, I was a wreck. It felt as though my ribs had caved in and I could barely draw breath. The knowledge that she was truly dying, that this wasn't just another staged scenario, ate away at me. At first, I refused to cooperate with their plan, or even watch the monitor. I turned my back on the screen, arms folded, jaw clenched in a mixture of dread and fury. Solomon didn't lash out or punish me. He just shrugged in that maddeningly calm way of his. His eyes held a strange pity as he said that, while my cooperation was preferred, it wasn't strictly necessary. According to him, if he was correct, then events would unfold as they were always meant to, whether I agreed or not. The last 5 days of Rachel's life would roll by on that screen regardless of my consent. He was right, of course. The footage started playing again, set to run without pause until it reached its end. The final chapter of her existence. She had only days left, he said. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't rewrite it. If I wanted to watch, that was up to me. If I didn't, the video would just keep going anyway, blurting out the images of her final hours into an empty room. So it was my choice to either avert my eyes and lose those last moments I could share with her, or surrender to the heartbreak and see it through. I tried to look away at first, but after an hour, I caved. My heart hammered. I felt sick to my stomach, but I couldn't bear the idea of not watching when she was right there, still living, still breathing, even if it was only a recording from years ago. However twisted it was, part of me believed that by witnessing her final days, I was, in some small way, with her. If there was any last clue that might help me, any chance she was leaving me an unexpected message, I would find it. If that was a delusion, if she was definitively gone, as they'd shown me with that horrifying glass tank, maybe I was just clinging to a fantasy. But I didn't care. I refused to abandon her. I'd always believed she was alone in that room. Now, I realized it was far worse. She was alone in that entire life. No family, no friends, no freedom. Taken at a young age because she was special, used for whatever twisted experiments they wanted, and eventually left to die. Even if it was just me staring at an old video feed, I could bear witness. I could be with her in spirit, letting her know, if only in my own mind, that she wasn't abandoned in those final hours. So I watched. I watched nearly every minute. I only paused to eat in quick gulps or run to the bathroom, even though the guards refused to stop the playback. I suppose that was Solomon's design. He wanted me forced to absorb every moment, to see if I'd break, or if I'd discover something else hidden in the images. And for 4 days, I clung to each frame like a drowning man. By the time I reached the last day, I was half delirious, emotionally gutted, sleeping in fitful bursts between scenes. Sometimes, I dozed so hard that I missed an hour or two. Then I'd snap awake in a panic, worried I'd lost some vital clue or precious memory. But each time, I'd catch up to find Rachel still reading or dozing herself. The difference was that she looked worse. At times, she'd press a hand to her abdomen with a grimace, struggling to rise from the bed. Once, she got up too quickly and wobbled as though dizzy. Another time, I heard her talk. Though there was no audio, I could see her lips move, calling for someone. Anyone. The emptiness of that sealed room answered her with silence. On the morning of the 4th day, I woke to find the guards had left a tray of breakfast and lunch on my table while I'd slept. My immediate reaction was to check the monitor, heart hammering. I must have slept for hours. What if I had missed something crucial? But apparently, Rachel had also been sleeping much of that same morning, so I hadn't missed any major evento. Ironically, it was as if her schedule was syncing with mine. A final, eerie parallel. My gut twisted at the thought. She woke up a bit later, wincing as she slowly pushed herself upright, and I realized she was hurting badly now. She tried to smile at the camera, but it was a pale, trembling effort. Then she set up a fresh canvas. Another painting. This was the second of 3 final paintings she made. The first had appeared late on the 3rd day. An old-fashioned movie theater from the perspective of someone seated in the back row. On the screen was a single sledgehammer leaning against a brick wall. At the time, I'd studied it meticulously, scanning for any cryptic words or phrases hidden in the swirling lines. Eventually, I found something in the seat numbers. She had zoomed in on the row ahead, where the seats were folded up, and each seat had a brass plate with digits, upside down from her vantage, yet she'd carefully painted them so you could still read them. I wrote them down in my mind, repeating them like a mantra. 2, 43, 26, 89. But what did they mean? They seemed random. Some code, a combination to a lock, a date. I wrestled with it and got nowhere. Maybe they were just illusions, but her face had been serious. Her movements deliberate. This was her second to last message, presumably. I forced myself to keep the numbers at the forefront of my memory. She had to have intended them for me. Now, as she began the second of these final 3 paintings, I leaned in, ignoring my hunger. She looked so weary, so close to collapsing, yet her eyes glinted with fierce determination. Each brushstroke was more frantic than usual, the arcs of color less precise. She took frequent breaks, pressing a hand to her chest or her head, as though in pain or dizziness. Part of me wanted to scream at the screen. Stop painting, Rachel, rest. But another part knew. Painting was her only language left for me. When she finished the second painting, I found it baffling. The scene showed a cave or tunnel with gnarled root-like walls that bent overhead. Parts of the root system were dark red, and other parts had a scorched, blackened look, as though burned. In the center of this root cave was a low table made of the same material, seemingly half alive. A shadow of a person stretched across that table, arms cradling a long, oval-shaped bundle. I zoomed my eyes across each detail, hoping to see a hidden word or a clue. Nothing jumped out. It all felt symbolic. Or maybe it was describing something literal. Did she see a place that was part living root, part corridor? Some place I might someday find. I talked to her quietly then, forgetting she couldn't hear me. Or maybe she could, in some impossible sense. I thanked her for not giving up, for still trying to communicate. I told her I was sorry, that I'd never been able to rescue her, and I apologized for letting them carry me off to that facility, for letting her die alone. Even as I spoke, I remembered the horrifying tank in which they preserved her body, a hideous testament to how thoroughly they'd stolen her life. I almost stopped watching right there. The grief was too heavy, making my chest feel crushed. But I couldn't, because she had one more painting left, and I knew it was coming. She slept longer after finishing that second piece. By the 5th day, she woke around what seemed like dawn, her face drawn and pale. She was shaking as she approached another fresh canvas, though she tried to steady herself before raising the brush. This final painting was done with swift, bold strokes. It took shape rapidly, some vantage point from a front porch looking out into the countryside at sunrise. The main focus was 2 hands, interlocked in a tight grip, glowing with red and orange highlights from the early morning sun. She poured what remained of her spirit into it. I could sense her trembling arms, her anguished expression. When she was done, she lifted the canvas to the camera, close enough that I could see the brushstrokes and the sweat on her brow. She gave a small, tired smile, heartbreakingly fragile, as though she might collapse any second. For a moment, that painting filled the entire monitor, a final gift from her to me. Even while the rest of me was drowning in sorrow, I felt a faint glimmer of hope. Maybe she was telling me that in another life, or another path, we'd be safe, united, able to hold each other's hands at sunrise. Then it ended. The feed abruptly cut to black. A few seconds later, I saw glimpses of frantic activity in the corners of the shot, masked figures rushing in with medical gear. And then the footage froze, flickered, and turned off completely. I choked on a sob, powerless to see any more. She was gone. Solomon had been standing behind me, silent during her last painting, letting me watch without interruption. When the screen went dark, he stepped forward, voice calm. "You've done well, Thomas. Very, very well." I nearly spat at him, overwhelmed with grief and rage, but I was too hollow. I stayed in my seat, numb as he continued. "For the past 5 days of viewing, we've tracked over 1,000 micro-variations in Rachel's behavior that appear to mirror your behavior, your emotional states, your reactions. Our suspicion was correct. The 2 of you remain in sync in some intangible way, as though separated by time but still connected. It truly is extraordinary." He paused, then added quietly, "I'm sorry for your pain." I stared at the dark screen, my throat tight. I hate you," I whispered, though my voice carried little heat. "You took everything from her." He shrugged, his expression sympathetic, but also clinical. We needed to learn, and now we proceed to the next phase. You see, as we told you, Rachel had within her a foreign implant. Some ancient seed or clipping from a special tree. We believe it gave her abilities that went beyond normal remote viewing, crossing timelines. We'd hoped she would survive the integration process, but she died before it could fully bond. Yet we preserved her body, knowing the entity inside her remains viable, albeit dormant. A chill of understanding crawled up my spine. You're putting it into me, I said, voice trembling. That's insane. I won't let you. Solomon's gaze hardened. We suspected you might say that, but, as I've said, we don't require your consent. You either comply, or we force you. He gave a thin smile. Given your unique resonance with Rachel, we suspect you may succeed where she failed. Perhaps it won't kill you. Perhaps it will. We're prepared to accept either outcome. I was on my feet, roaring with grief and fury, fists clenched. Don't you dare talk about her that way. Like she was just a failed experiment. She was a person. I lunged a step forward, but Solomon raised a hand. Behind me, I heard the distinctive click of multiple guns being cocked. The guards had quietly entered. He gave a small sigh, as though disappointed. Threats won't help you. If you'd prefer sedation, so be it. I glanced around, half ready to go down swinging, but the muzzle of a gun was leveled at my side. With a hoarse shout, I swung an arm at the nearest guard anyway, only to be struck by something cold and metallic along my ribs. Pain exploded, and I collapsed. Darkness snatched me again. When I woke, there was a dull ache in my upper torso, just under my ribs. I lay on a bed in a stark, windowless room, an IV taped to my arm. My head pounded. Slowly, I moved my hand to feel my abdomen, but there was only a small bandage and a slight swelling around the area. My chest twinged, a new sensation, and I realized how horrifyingly different my body felt. Even my thoughts felt off, like the faint echo of a melody in the distance, one I couldn't quite grasp. At first, panic spiked. Oh God, they did it. They must have surgically transferred that alien seed or piece of living wood from Rachel's corpse into me. A wave of revulsion mingled with sadness. Rachel, I'm so sorry. Then I felt something else, an indescribable presence, a gentle hum in the back of my mind, faint as a lullaby, half heard through a wall. My heartbeat sped up, half from fear, half from a strange awe. Could that be the thing? A jolt of footsteps outside made me tense. The door swung open, and one of the guards peered in, gun at the ready. Behind him came Mr. Solomon, unarmed and calm as ever. He surveyed me with mild curiosity. Feeling any side effects yet? He nodded toward my bandaged torso. We trust you'll find this arrangement more comfortable than the straps on the table. Don't try anything rash. We'd hate to injure you while you heal. I glared, wanting to hurl curses, but I forced myself to remain silent. Don't give them the satisfaction. I also feared they might do further harm if I openly resisted. Solomon considered me a moment, then said quietly, if the implant accepts you, you'll begin to sense changes. Stronger perception, perhaps. If it doesn't, you'll die. There's no gentle way to phrase it, but if you survive, we'll have much to do together. Analyzing your abilities, exploring the phenomenon that Rachel couldn't fully control. You'll be valuable, Thomas. You might even come to see some advantage in it. His lips curved in a small, mocking grin. And if you ever do master the power she possessed, you might even find a way to connect with her. Who can say? A surge of raw emotion ignited in me. Hope and rage coiled together. The idea of reconnecting with her in some timeline was as tempting as it was cruel. They're offering me a carrot, I realized bitterly. They want me to cooperate. Biting my lip to keep from yelling, I turned my face away. He gave a small nod. We'll let you rest. I'll be back later. With that, he left, the guard trailing behind. I was alone again, pinned by a swirl of dread. My chest still burned, and that faint humming in my mind pulsed gently. What are you? I wondered, focusing on the presence, but it remained elusive. Over the next few hours, or days, time was a blur. I found I could occasionally sense a faint guiding voice, not words, but an echo of direction. If I visualized the building, I felt I could detect the location of certain halls or doorways, as if the root or seed inside me was tapping into something bigger. Or maybe I was just delirious. Eventually I forced myself up. The door, as expected, was locked. Guards outside. No easy exit. The voice in my head was no magic bullet. But if Rachel was forced to endure a version of this, maybe she discovered some partial ability that helped her see across time. Could that happen to me too? Then one night, or what I assumed was night, given how many hours had passed, The humming in my mind flared. The overhead lights flickered. My chest constricted, as though an unseen hand pressed me from within. Then I heard a click from the door. Cautiously, I tested the handle. Unlocked. My breath caught. Is this real? Outside, dim emergency lights lined the corridor. The normal overhead fluorescents were out. I heard frantic voices echoing from some distant area, and my gut twisted in alarm. Something had disrupted the power. Possibly the entity inside me was interfering with their systems, if it had that power at all. Maybe I was hallucinating, but I had to try. Clenching my jaw, I eased open the door, stepping into the hallway. A guard's shout sounded from around the corner, joined by rapid footsteps. I had no intention of waiting for them. I broke into a run, the humming in my chest intensifying, guiding me left and right. Each door I passed, the locks seemed to click undone if I tried them all. I bounded through corridors, hearing radio chatter behind me. Someone barking orders for backup. They'll chain me up or kill me if they get me, I thought, heart hammering. I must keep going. Eventually, I found a heavy side door that opened onto bright sunlight. My eyes stung after days in fluorescent lighting. A wave of fresh air enveloped me. The first real air I'd breathed in a week. But the courtyard outside was overshadowed by a high fence. A cage, I realized, and guards were streaming out of the building, rifles in hand. My chest lurched with panic. That faint hum soared to a crescendo, almost singing in my mind. Run. I saw a path leading beyond the fence, but it was locked. With no time to spare, I vaulted behind a row of bushes. The guards fanned out, scanning for me. I froze, barely breathing. Then another wave of that intangible guidance flared, and the fence's lock seemed to click open. I lunged for it, ignoring the yells that broke out behind me. The chain parted. The gate swung. I dashed through and into a stand of trees. Footsteps thundered in pursuit, but the hum in my head grew insistent, urging me onward. Branches whipped at my arms, stinging. The ground dipped and rose, but I never stumbled. What is this? Some extension of Rachel's power. I could hardly process it. All I knew was that each step carried me further from them, deeper into the woods. Their shouts grew fainter, and eventually, silence settled. The hum in my head quieted too, as if it had spent its energy. At last, after what felt like miles, the trees began to thin. My heart soared with relief, and then I froze. Through the last line of trees, I glimpsed a well. Old weathered stones, a rickety wooden lid. Rachel's second painting, I realized with a jolt. She'd once depicted an old stone well. My chest tightened. This can't be real. Yet everything matched, from the shape of the stones to the rotting wood. Overcome by wonder and fear, I crept forward. A memory returned. Her painting of an island house, the painting of a swirling root cave, numbers in a theater seat, a sledgehammer leaning against a wall. So many images. Did this well connect to them somehow? I circled it carefully, noticing footprints in the dirt. Then I heard the faint snap of a twig behind me. They're close. Fear spiked my pulse. In desperation, I yanked the well's wooden lid aside, letting it crash to the ground. The interior was black as pitch. If I jumped down there, I'd likely break my neck. But if I stayed here, they'd capture me. No choice. I braced a hand on the well's edge, leaning in. A swirl of musty air greeted me, plus something else. A faint glow. No, that's impossible. Shouts erupted behind me. The men had found me, rifle scanning. One approached the well, cursing. I can't hide in it, I realized, but maybe I can mislead them. Heart pounding, I shoved the lid fully off, making sure it landed noisily. Then crouching, I slunk into the underbrush on the opposite side. Please let them think I jumped down. Footsteps pounded closer. He's near, one barked. Check the well. Another man's flashlight beamed into the darkness. In that confusion, I slithered away, huddling behind a thick trunk. They started cursing, shining lights around. I crept further. By some miracle, no one spotted me. Tense minutes passed, the men's voices echoing as they spread out. I have to keep going, I told myself. Eventually, I heard them fade. With silent care, I advanced deeper into the forest, letting the hum guide me once more. Sometime later, I emerged onto a road, normal as any public highway. Cars passed. The sun was well overhead, maybe midday. My clothes were torn, my limbs scraped, but I was free. For how long? I couldn't say. They might send vehicles searching for me, or track me in other ways. I have no money, no phone, no ID, but at least I'm not locked up. Maybe I can hitchhike far away. A semi braked near me. Its driver, an older man with a mustache, leaned out the window calling, "You look lost, son. Need a ride?" My first instinct was wariness, but I had no better option. Better to risk it than wait for those bastards to find me. So I climbed into the passenger seat, offering him a shaky thanks. The side of the truck displayed an odd logo, a cartoon figure with a sledgehammer, like that painting. My pulse gave a jolt of recognition. Rachel. The coincidences felt uncanny, but I was too exhausted to parse them. He drove for hours while I dozed off. When he finally stopped at a truck stop in Nevada, I got out, unsure what to do next. We parted amicably. I claimed I might look around for a payphone or a store. He said he'd be leaving in an hour if I wanted to continue. I had no idea if I should. My mind was still reeling. Wandering aimlessly, I found a small downtown area. That's when I saw it. A movie theater with a classic marquee. My heart jumped. Another painting's reference. Could it be that theater? My legs carried me there, chest fluttering with fresh dread. Sure enough, the architecture, the sign shape, even the flickering bulbs. It all matched. Rachel's painting of the theater from the vantage of the back row. The sledgehammer. Was I crossing into the paintings themselves? Following a path she somehow charted? I walked in, ignoring the odd look from the teenager at the candy counter. He offered me a half-rate ticket for a horror double feature. I declined. I was only there to see if I could glean any clue about Rachel. I asked if he'd ever heard of her. Rachel Donovan. He shook his head, clueless. I pressed him about the theater's history, but he only said it was built on the site of an old house that had burned down in the 1930s. Nothing else. Dead end. Deflated? I turned to go. He offered me a discount if I came back to see a film, calling himself Marshall. I thanked him absently, stepping onto the sidewalk outside. Looking up at the neon sign overhead, I recalled her painting. Seat number plates, the sledgehammer, the hammer of memory. I turned, noticing an alleyway. A breeze stirred the leaves overhead. Could something be hidden back there? Without quite knowing why, I headed down the alley, heart pounding. The far end opened to a fenced-off backyard. Within it, a single tree, twisting red bark, lush green leaves. Rachel's tree. The same vision from her paintings, the one with swirling rootswort. My breath caught. For a moment, I stared, unsure whether to feel terror or elation. Then something called to me from inside, that faint hum again. The seed within me recognized it. I hopped the fence, ignoring the small cut on my leg from a stray wire. Up close, the tree smelled of sweet earth and faint spice. Its bark glistened with a subtle life, the trunk thick with age. I pressed a trembling hand to it, the hum in my chest intensifying. My lips parted in a silent gasp as a seam appeared at the base, like a hidden door in the root state. Light glimmered within. I dared to look back only once. The sky threatened rain, the wind picking up. They might be chasing me still. So I followed the trees beckoning, slipping through that opening in its roots. The interior of the trunk led downward, forming a tunnel lined with living bark. My mind spun. Rachel's second painting had shown a root cave. This must be it, connecting me to somewhere else, someplace that might, just might, be safe. The passage glowed with soft, golden light, the air sweet with the same aroma. I walked for what felt like hours, never tiring, the path twisting. Eventually, I came upon a brick wall. Dead end. But as I approached, it shimmered and dissolved, leading into a basement. I stepped through, heart hammering. It was empty, but a scrawled 2 in the dust of the floor caught my eye. My pulse spiked, remembering the seat numbers, all connected. The house above turned out to be deserted, perched near a beach on a small island. The layout matched one of Rachel's paintings exactly. I had no explanation for how this was possible, a parallel world, or some realm between worlds. Either way, the tree reappeared outside, a silent sentinel. No people. I felt lonely, but a sense of peace lingered, too. I spent hours exploring. Then I descended back into the tree tunnel, discovering more branching passages, more worlds. Another basement had 43 etched on the floor, and I found a sledgehammer leaning against the wall. Another time, the passage led me to a locked door with 26 carved on it. I pried it open with the hammer, revealing a wide corridor that seemed half in ruins. I was like a tracker dog, I thought wryly, recalling my father's old hound. I pressed on, guided by an intuition that felt like Rachel's presence, or the seed's influence, or both. Finally, after more twisting passages, I encountered the last number, 89. The bricks shimmered, parted, and I stepped into a small basement bedroom. There was a battered bed frame, and a woman using one of its metal legs to pry at a thick patch of concrete behind the bricks. She swung around, eyes wide. My heart nearly stopped. She looked so much like Rachel, and yet not. A different version. She scowled warily, brandishing the bed leg. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice taut. "How'd you get in here?" I came through the tree tunnel, I stammered, chest tight with shock. She blinked, recognition flickering in her eyes. So it's real, she muttered, gaze sweeping over me. You're not from here, are you? I managed a shaky grin. No, I'm from Texas. Or somewhere else. Actually, it's complicated. My voice cracked. Your name, is it Rachel? She scowled. Yeah, that's me. But you're not from around here. So what's going on? A half smile tugged her lips as though in relief, though she hid it quickly. Everything tumbled out in a rush. The job, the illusions, the experiments, the seed inside me, how I'd run, how I'd found the tree. She listened, eyes wide, occasionally nodding with weird familiarity. Yes, I realized. This version of her is a prisoner too, walled into a basement by some ex-boyfriend or captor. Except she wasn't forced by a shadowy organization, but by a single malicious manipulator. She'd discovered the tree passages, but refused to fully escape them, not wanting to be further bound to the tree's bizarre power zone. She was attempting to break through the basement's outer wall physically using bed frames, but it was slow going. I realized I could help her. I had the sledgehammer. Finally, I offered to do half the work, and she accepted, suspicious but hopeful. We took turns bashing at the bricks, eventually cracking into the concrete behind. Hours later, we'd broken a hole big enough to climb through. We emerged into the early dawn, stepping out of the decrepit house. She told me we had to be wary in case her captor was still around, but we found no sign of him. The front door opened easily onto a wide yard, the rising sun painting everything gold, and for the first time, I truly felt free. My heart soared, and I remembered Rachel's last painting, 2 hands clasped in the sunrise. Maybe this was what she meant. A final gift, across worlds, letting me save this other Rachel from her own prison. We stepped onto the porch. She was battered but unbroken, a fierce glint in her eyes. We locked gazes, and I saw in her a reflection of the woman I'd once known only through a screen. Not identical, but kindred. She hesitantly reached for my hand. I gripped hers, tears pricking my eyes, thinking of the other Rachel's final painting. She must have known. She left me a path. She led me here. Neither of us spoke for a long moment, letting the morning light wash over us. We were strangers but connected by threads of fate. In a quivering breath, I whispered, I'm sorry I couldn't save her. She gave me a puzzled look, but then squeezed my fingers gently. You saved me, though. The warmth in my chest swelled, that hum pulsing with quiet approval. Or maybe that was just my heart. I recalled all those times I'd watched the feed, feeling powerless, guilty. Maybe that was never the real objective. Maybe Rachel, the original Rachel, had known that all along. Her existence was lost, but she could guide me to save another version of herself. In so doing, maybe she found a kind of redemption for both of us. We walked away from the house, hand in hand, the sun bright on the horizon. I glanced back only once, half expecting illusions or men in suits to appear. Nothing, just a silent property in the early morning. A battered structure that no longer had the power to hold her. Or me. If that other organization existed in this world, I had no sign of it. Perhaps we'd be safe here, forging a new life in peace. But even if not, even if some threat lingered, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My story had begun as a man paid to watch a woman in a locked room. Now, I was free. She, or a version of her, was free, and the seed inside me, well, I would figure that out in time. Perhaps it would guide me to more doorways, more possibilities. Perhaps it would fade. Either way, I had hope. Hope that we could chart our own path from here on out. Hope that we could be more than watchers or captives, that we could be human again. As we disappeared down the country road, the wind stirred the leaves in the morning light, whispering like a gentle melody. In my mind, I swore I could almost hear Rachel's voice, not the one behind me. The one next to me was real and solid, breathing in. No, the voice of the departed Rachel, the doomed girl whose final painting was a promise of sunrise and intertwined fingers. Thank you, I thought, my tears falling without shame. For everything. We kept walking, arms brushing gently as we navigated the dusty lane. Eventually she turned and asked quietly, what happens next? I gave her hand a small squeeze, letting the sunlight warm our faces. I don't know, I answered, but wherever we go, we're free to choose it together. And that was enough. After all the illusions, all the heartbreak, all the sorrow of her final days, that single moment of freedom felt like the greatest gift Rachel could have left behind. Not just for me, but for all her possible selves.